to the creation of the dedicated seats in the House of Commons to represent overseas voters, where the candidates will be fully focused on the overseas communities.
As a Canadian abroad, it really couldn't be much easier. It's a one-page form. You sign it.
That provision in the Canada's Election Act that prohibited Canadians who've been overseas for more than 5 years from being able to vote. And that was considered to be unconstitutional. So with the stroke of a pen, there were 1 million additional voters added to the voters list.
Why you would choose to use the United States of America when citizens living abroad actually pay taxes to the United States federal government and Canadians living abroad do not?
Okay, before we answer that.
MPs, the potential for MPs representing Canadians living abroad. So I understand that France has 11 MPs, or whatever the equivalent title is, and that they're elected based on regions around the globe that are set up. So I'm just a bit fascinated by what exactly you envision this looking like in the Canadian context. You've mentioned 400,000 Canadians living in Hong Kong. So do you have a number of foreign MPs that you're suggesting?
This guy's garage. Like and subscribe.
I would now like to welcome our witnesses for today's meeting. As an individual, Daniel Suka, and representing Grits Abroad, Dr. Timothy Veale.
You referenced or suggested amendments to the Canada Elections Act in terms of voting by means other than mail, including at embassies, but I'm looking at Section 228 of the Canada Elections Act, and that's already there.
Sure. Okay, I'm muted. Yes, thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. I could not find that confirmation that you found, but moreover, that's just one channel that it can be allowed. That it is allowed. That's great. But also ballot drop off, being able to, or for those of us Canadians who are not in proximity to an embassy or consulate. Even if that would be allowed, if I can't get there, that I can send my ballot back via tracked courier, and again, potentially prepaid. That would be extremely helpful. What I'm arguing for is to broaden the channels by which the voters can return their ballots.
For that, the reference has been made to barriers, and I take your point about the fact that, Mr. Suka, you spent $60 to return a ballot, so that could be a barrier. But in terms of the process of signing up to vote as a Canadian abroad, it really couldn't be much easier. It's a one-page form. You sign it. You provide proof of the fact that you had been born in Canada and that you're a Canadian citizen, so you can provide a copy of your passport, a citizenship certificate or card, a birth certificate, and then you send it to Elections Canada. I mean, how much easier could it be?
Sure. To respond to that, it isn't that there is any one specific element that is a barrier. It's the full process that is not encouraging, and as Dr. Veale has pointed out, the numbers speak for themselves, not encouraging a significant number of Canadian voters to vote. It's yes, as you say, it's that one form, but I have 24 emails with Elections Canada in the last couple of years to pin down what my final address was. This is a big issue because Elections Canada ties you to the constituency in which you last resided, but that is not a clear thing, surprisingly. And furthermore, after 20 some odd years outside of a country, that relation for me or for any particular voter becomes a little bit fuzzy. So it isn't one specific thing, it's the entire process. Getting the kit into the mail, into my mailbox in front of my street, and then again, getting it back in a timely fashion, and then even knowing my faith in what Elections Canada does, it's solid. But I don't know. Did my vote arrive. I got nothing back from Elections Canada. Again, it isn't any one thing, as you point out. It's the full process, and I think Dr. Veale's numbers really speak to that.
Right, but just to clarify, once you fill out the application, once your name is added to the International Register of Electors, a ballot kit will be issued to you at the time of each writ period. You would not need to apply again and again. Am I correct with that?
You are correct.
Okay. And in terms of, and so therefore you would get I presume you're receiving a ballot kit fairly early on during the writ period. Is that fair? Is that happening?
So the writ, just in the most recent campaign, the writ was announced. It was a total, please don't quote me on the numbers, 37 or 39 days for the campaign. It took several weeks to get it into my mailbox. It took me some time. I'm a voter. I want to consider all the candidates. I then have to spend the time to look up who's running in my riding. I want to find out about them. As I mentioned, the candidates who have a stronger digital presence really got my attention quicker, regardless of party, regardless of affiliation. I then had to make my decision, fill out my ballot, send it back with tracking because I want to know whether it got there. In the end, the tracking failed. Again, as Dr. Veale mentioned, the timing of our campaign seemed to be getting tighter and tighter, and yet the traditional postal mail system, why could Elections Canada not simply have a platform where I can log in and 24 hours after the writ being issued, I can download, as my wife can, who is an American voter, by the way, can download the PDF of the ballot, and I simply print it here, fill it out, and I can mail it back right away. Why do I have to wait for a piece of paper to come from Canada?
Thank you so much.
Particularly given the apparently low interest amongst Canadians overseas in participating in our electoral system. So I really do appreciate that. Now, Dr. Veale, I scribbled down as quickly as I could the statistics that you were giving us about voter turnout amongst overseas Canadians. 5 million overseas Canadians. I think you said 72% eligibility. I don't argue with that number. That's probably reliable. That translates into 3.6 million potential voters, and only 100,000 actually bother to take any steps at all in getting involved in the election system. And you're comparing that to other countries. But I want to make sure that when we're comparing to other countries, that we're comparing apples to apples. I'm going to turn to a recent Supreme Court of Canada case, which one of you referenced. I forget who it was, but it was the Frank decision of 2019, where the Supreme Court of Canada struck down as unconstitutional that provision in the Canada's Election Act that prohibited Canadians who've been overseas for more than 5 years from being able to vote. And that was considered to be unconstitutional. So with the stroke of a pen, there were 1 million additional voters added to the voters list. It doesn't mean there's 1 million Canadians, overseas Canadians, who are engaged in our political system. Now, Dr. Veale, my question to you is, when you're comparing Canadian statistics to, let's say, American or some of the European countries that you mentioned, what are their rules about overseas citizens being engaged in the electoral system? Is it open to everybody, or are there some limitations? Do you know?
I wish I could tell you with great precision. Thanks for this question. It's a great one. I don't have a precise answer to give you on what their actual rules are. In reference to what Daniel was sharing before, I have observed that over decades, their participation has increased over time, and we are just having just initial conversations about this. It's a very little talked about idea. So, as far as who exactly can vote and who cannot among the diaspora of the countries named, regrettably, I'm uncertain. I wish I could say.
Good. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague, Mr. Calkins, who has a related question. Thank you.
So, most Canadians know when they file their taxes, they have an option to share their residency and their intentions with allowing Revenue Canada to share that information with Elections Canada. I'm assuming both of you are aware of that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. So that's largely replaced the notion of enumerating people for elections for the last significant number of years. And I can't remember which one of you brought up the notion that the United States of America has a much higher voter turnout with its citizens living abroad. And I wonder, in the fairness of the question that my colleague, Mr. Van Popta, just asked, the United States of America taxes citizenship, not residency. And while I'm not going to ask you guys when the last time you paid taxes in Canada is, if we're going to be comparing countries and voter participation, perhaps we shouldn't be comparing a country that taxes citizenship versus a country that taxes residency, which is what Canada does. So I guess I'm curious, is there any other country that does what Canada does that has a better voter turnout? You did reference Portugal. I think you said Portugal, and I think France as well, having some differing systems. But I would be curious on your position of why you would choose to use the United States of America when citizens living abroad actually pay taxes to the United States federal government, and Canadians living abroad do not.
Okay, before we answer that, you are at 5 minutes, but I was going to add a minute at the end of the round. So how about I add that minute now, if that works for you guys, and ask the witnesses to, if one of you wants to take the full minute or split it 30 seconds, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Do you want to go ahead, Timothy?
Yes. I do. Sorry. I've just had a problem with my computer. Yeah, happy to take that question. Apples to apples, I completely agree. I can confirm to you that the French citizens, they are just like in Canada. They are taxed on residency, not on citizenship, and yet they have this history of representation abroad, and so as a result, I believe they have much higher voter participation rates. At the same time, I think there's an indirect reference to a topic that needs to be brought up about representation without taxation. Is that fair? Does that need to be looked at? Absolutely. I think this question deserves examination as well. To be fair, I think it needs to be looked at. The French pull it off. The Americans have higher representation and participation than we do. I think Canada should explore fair models of taxation for non-resident Canadians as well. I think that needs to be considered part and parcel of the broader conversation as well.
Thank you so much.
I'm just going to pick up on the conversations that we were having around taxation and the requirements that are on Canadian citizens to participate in taxes versus Canadians that are part of the diaspora abroad. What would be the logic reason to sort of make that investment if the requirements are not the same for all Canadians? Any one of you can take that question.
Could I jump in with a reply? Thank you for the question. It's a very good one, and this topic is a very important one. I would preface my remarks by pointing out that in Canada, forever, taxation occurs when a taxable event occurs. You or I will pay GST or HST when we purchase a good or a service. If we don't purchase a good or a service, we don't pay GST or HST, and so on and so forth. And all taxes are tied to a taxable event. The challenge in making Canada more like the US, if that would be the right way to go, is to define what is the taxable event that a Canadian who expatriates him or herself because of their job, because of their family, because of engagement overseas. And I think we can assume that that's a good thing without going into too much detail. Define what is the taxable event that has occurred that is different than, as you've just mentioned, that a Canadian who stays in their home riding or his constituency
but perhaps maybe
hasn't done.
If I can rephrase my question this way, I think it was Mr. Veale who talked about representation. Representation without that tax fairness, the taxation on Canadians that live abroad. Help me understand how that's a fair system for Canadians who have representation because they're paying the taxes.
Sure. Well, I can answer that in two ways. First of all, we have to respect the FCC decision. It was very clear. Residency has zero bearing on the right to vote. And that decision, as was previously explained by one of the committee members, was an extremely powerful decision. The decision left no doubt in anyone's mind as to there is a separation between the right to vote, and as I mentioned in my comments, it's a fundamental element of the Canadian citizenship and I think Canadian identity. So back to your question, though. Take my sister. She recently passed away, but previously in her life, she was living in Peterborough, Ontario. She did not have a job. She was handicapped. She received ODA, Ontario Disability Assistance. She paid no taxes. She had no income. She paid no income taxes. She did not pay taxes to anybody anywhere in Canada, other than the GST if she bought a coffee at Tim Hortons. That's a detail. My point is, she can vote. What is the taxable event that she has to do, or that she would have had to do, to demonstrate that she's eligible to vote? That I don't. Do you see what I mean? So now again, this classic argument: if you've got to have skin in the game to be a voter. Hang on for a second. What is it that you want me to pay tax for? And if you say, well, all Canadians should pay a tax simply because they're Canadians and they benefit from all levels of government, all those goods and all the things that government do for them, fantastic. And now you're into the territory of poll tax. And this is nowhere that any of us, I think, in the room want to go. So it's an important, as Dr. Veale mentioned, I would definitely refer to his comments. It's a very, very important question, but it's a difficult one. And I don't have a clear answer for you.
You mentioned that you had to physically mail a piece of paper to get a piece of paper from Canada. Can you see how that could be tightened up? You said that it's possible that maybe to submit information and then get it back digitally could save some time as well.
Sure, absolutely. I have an account with the Royal Bank. I can log in right now and I can move money. I can pay bills. I can borrow money. I have an account with Service Canada. I can log in right now and see what my CPP estimate is. I have an account with Revenue Canada. Why can I not have an account with Elections Canada? I can log in, make sure my information is up to date. There's a green check mark so that I know that I'm in the international voters list. And when the writ for the next election is then called, I'll get an email or something will pop up, and I will get sent that ballot electronically that I will print on my printer right over there, and name the candidate of my choice, and then mail. Okay, now we've devolved to the moving dead trees aspect, sending that back plenty in advance. So Elections Canada could do a lot, I think, within the current legislative framework, or maybe with only minor legislative changes. And then furthermore, I would really want to see Elections Canada informing all candidates in all constituencies of the number of voters who are living overseas and how to contact them electronically. that is something that Elections Canada does now. Many people in this room have been candidates, and you'll know better than I do. You get that list of voters. Your campaign gets that list of voters, and you are free. You are enabled by law to contact them. You absolutely are, because you are candidating yourself and sharing your vision, your messaging, your policies. That absolutely should be done for overseas voters as well. And again, as I spoke earlier, that will kickstart this probably lengthy, virtuous circle of getting more and more Canadians contacted by candidates, getting more and more to be engaged, getting candidates to pay more and more attention to votes that could sway the election in their constituency. And we get a virtuous cycle. So there are some concrete things Elections Canada could do. I think right now the technical experts will know whether that requires regulatory change or legislative change.
Thank you so much. That ends our session. I'd like to thank both of our witnesses for being here. I will suspend the meeting for us to go in camera for the next portion of our meeting.
I have to admit, I did a little Google search about France myself, because this is not what I thought we would be talking about today, is about MPs, the potential for MPs representing Canadians living abroad. So I understand that France has 11 MPs, or whatever the equivalent title is, and that they're elected based on regions around the globe that are set up. So I'm just a bit fascinated by what exactly you envision this looking like in the Canadian context. You've mentioned 400,000 Canadians living in Hong Kong. So do you have a number of foreign MPs that you're suggesting if government were to undertake that work? And how would you divide them around the globe? I'm just really curious to know exactly how many and where you think these folks should be representing.
Another great practical question. I think that initially there would have to be a census taken of Canadians, a reliable census of Canadians taken abroad, and different models looked at. So I think that the friendship approach, without knowing off the top of my head how many seats they have in the equivalent of their parliament, I think there needs to be some consideration of what kind of percentage any additional seats would add to the House of Commons in Ottawa. So, I mentioned that the number of Canadians abroad is equivalent to, if we were a province, we'd be the 5th largest province in Canada. I'm not suggesting that we have a number of seats to represent that in proportion. I'm not suggesting that at all. But as a fair step, we should have some. We should have some representation. We have none. Nobody solicits our votes. Decisions are made for us, about us, impacting our children, impacting my children, and we need to have some voices at the table, at tables like the one that you're sitting at, and we just don't have that. So I don't think we don't need to have an overly ambitious number of seats to represent overseas constituencies. I just think a fair and a minimally fair number is what would be appropriate.
Sure. Suka, do you have any comment on that as well?
I would fully endorse what Dr. Veale said, and I would add that 400,000 in Hong Kong, that's probably one of the biggest concentrations of Canadians in one geographical region. So yes, that group of Canadians might have 2 or 3 seats assigned to them. I don't know what Elections Canada does on the average number of voters per constituency in geographical Canada today. But going around the world, Western Europe, Africa, there's a huge number of Canadians working in aid in Africa, Southeast Asia. You could go around and you could probably come up with groupings that would equate, as Dr. Veale said, to a fair coherency with what the population per riding is in Canada, and there'd be a dozen, or there'd be 14 new seats in the House of Commons. This is not a bad thing at all.
So I understand that the makeup of the House of Commons is outlined within the Constitution itself. So do you think this would require a constitutional amendment?
I don't think it necessarily would. Of course, it has to be considered. You've raised the question. It has to be considered. My reading is that it isn't a certainty. I don't believe it's a certainty at all.
Mr. Suka, any comment on that?
I have no idea, so I can't comment. But you've raised the important point that voting for overseas Canadians is tightly tied to democracy itself in Canada. It is not something to be dismissed, and it is something that relates to all the public and national debate that there has been in the past few years on first past the post versus other methods. It relates to all of it. It is simple on the surface, but subtly very complex underneath. But no, I'm sorry, I don't know how that would affect. I do know that to change how Elections Canada would receive votes, this sort of mechanical change, this would require a legislative change for sure. But constitutional change for the number of seats in the House, I'm not sure.